Welcome to another day of stitching our whimsical flower hoop. Today we're going to make more straight puff flowers, and we're going to learn how to make a raised fishbone stitch for the pink flower right here. So we're going to be stitching these neighbors together. I'm going to start with the straight puff stitch, which is the same stitch we did over here, just in different configuration. And then we'll move on. So we need 6 strands. Now for this one, I have this long strand of 3 all cut and ready, so I'm going to use that. I'm just going to thread my smaller needle on, and I'm going to pull my needle to the center of this longer strand, and now I'm going to knot my ends together. Knotted. There we go. And I'm going to stitch with this to get 6 strands. You also could just cut a fresh section from your supply, but it's great to use what you have already. So we're going to work this from bottom to top. So I'm going to start over here on the left, and we're going to make a straight puff. And if that's new to you, we're going to come up at the tip of the petal, which we have marked as a line, and then we're going to go down at the base of the petal. Now you can see I've got all sorts of funky things going on here. So I'm just going to slide my needle under and kind of go back and forth, pulling from the bottom until I can see it's laying better and my threads have sorted themselves out a little bit. All right, we don't want it super tight to the fabric. And then we're going to repeat. We're going to come up at the tip, trying to hit the same hole if we can, if not very close to it. Pull our thread all the way up. And then we're going to go down at the base. Again, being gentle as we pull down, because we want this to be puffing up off the fabric. A nice little puffy flower. And I'm going to just help guide this in, make sure my thread is happy and it looks good. All right, now we're going to move to our middle stitch here. Now you can see there's a gap in the lines that we have marked here. There's not going to be a gap when we stitch. So this middle flower, middle petal, sorry, you can make a little bit taller, and your top petal is going to be just a little bit longer than marked. But I wanted there to be a visual gap so you didn't try and stitch it all as one petal, because that would be more confusing. So we're going to go up here. Make sure we didn't pull that too down. Down at the base. My thread is just struggling today. Here we go. I'm going to run my fingers, you can see here in the corner of your screen, over the thread real quick to help smooth it out, hopefully, so I don't have to mess with every stitch. All right, now I'm going to come up at the tip again. Again, very close to the same hole or in the same hole, and down at the base. And then we'll repeat for petal number 3 on this side. All right, now we move to row 2. For row 2, we want our ends to feel like they're coming down in here so that there's no visual gaps between our petals. We want this to look like it's all connected. So I'm going to come up. This time I'm going to start on the right because that's where I am. Then I'm going to kind of slide my needle down in between these petals and then come up at the tip and repeat. All right, this is the last petal here, the tip of the flower. And for this one, we're going to stop and evaluate at 2 times over, but we might do 3. So for the base of this, I'm going right at the tip of that petal below. Pull down. So that's 1 time. And here is 2. And now you can see that I have a bigger gap here on the right than the left. That's just because my thread pulled left a little bit. So this time I'm going to have my needle go just a titch to the right to help fill in the right side all the way. Make sure that puffs out. And then, caught a thread on this side. There we go. I think I'm going to add a 3rd one just to make sure that this top puffy flower just fills in all of this space and makes it look complete. There we go. And then what you can do is you can take your needle, just like we did with our first puff flower, and pop it under all of these stitches. Give them a nice little pull. Run the eye of your needle over the petals, kind of fluff them out, and you'll have this lovely puffy orange flower. Now to finish this flower, we're going to make a French knot with the orange in this gap at the circle in our stem. So I still have 6 strands of floss on my needle, and we're just going to make a single wrap knot. So I'm going to go hold the thread in my left hand, needle in my right hand, wrap the thread around one time. Needle goes back in the fabric very close to where it comes up. You slide the knot down to the fabric and pull down through, just kind of keeping everything out of the way. And we have our little orange knot. At this point, I'm going to anchor off, and then I'm going to grab 3 strands of 7 to 8, which is yellow, so that we can finish this flower. We can fill in the gap at the bottom of our flower. All right, I've switched to 7 to 8 on my needle. I have a knot at the end, and I'm going to come up here at the base of our 3 petals, just to the side of that first petal, and then I'm going to go down right here to the side of the other one, making a little horizontal straight stitch, and then I'm going to make a slightly smaller stitch right below it, the other side. And I believe I had 2 stitches marked on the pattern, but if you need a 3rd stitch to help connect down to the stem, add a 3rd stitch, just keeping them kind of tiny and small, so we got this yellow base here hooking to the flower. At this point, this flower is done, and I'm going to switch over to our pink so we can learn our raised fishbone for our second flower. Okay, with 3, 8, 3, 2 on my needle, we're going to come up here at the very pointy tip of our flower. And to make fishbone of any kind, your first stitch goes down the center, and then your next stitches alternate coming from sides, Xing over this stitch. So we're going to follow this line I have marked and just go down at the bottom. From here, we start making the fishbone stitches. So I'm going to come up to the side on my line, and then I'm going to aim for about 2/3 the way down my flower, and I'm going to go down on the outside of our flower. There's stitch, well, technically 2, but stitch 1. Now we're going to come up on the right hand side, again right on that line, the first spot that you can get your needle in without splitting the thread. And we're going to repeat and go down on the opposite side over here on the edge. Now we go back to the left side. We come up on the side, just the first place that we can get our needle in without splitting any threads. And we're going to pull this stitch to the right, and we're going to go down on the line just below our first stitch. And then, you guessed it, we're going to repeat on the right. Come up on the line and down on the side. And then we're just going to keep repeating this process until our coming up points right here start to run into our coming down points. And that's when I will check in with you, all right? All right, this stitch right here, this is the last one I can fit on the side before I'm gonna run into these stitches. So I'm gonna treat it just like I normally would. And then we'll make the stitch on the other side. Got a little more space on this side, which is no problem if your stitching is not perfectly even. And then for our next stitch, we're just gonna come up right on the outside, maybe even if we can fit it in the same hole for one of those stitches here. So just following along the outside. No knots. And then we continue overlapping, and you can see all of this buildup of stitches is what's going to make this be a raised effect at the end of the flower. So I'm just going to keep coming up on, oh no, did I make a knot? Oh, I made a knot. I haven't done that before. Hold while I fix my knot. All right, fix the knot. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna keep adding stitches out and around until all we can see are just top stitches that cover this entire flower shape. Clearly I cannot think and talk at the same time. Now this is pretty close, but here in person, from the side I can still see these a little bit. So I'm gonna add at least one more stitch on both sides to make sure we come down to a point at the bottom, and to just make sure that we've got all of our stitches, inside stitches, covered. We want it to just be a perfect little overlapping fishtail, fishbone on the top. There you have it. Then we're going to finish this flower by making a French knot here at the top with 3-5-1. So I'm going to anchor this off and trade to 3-5-1 and make a knot. All right, 3-5-1 on my needle, and then we're going to make a French knot just like we did down here in the stem. We're going to do, let me check my guide, 1 wrap. So we're going to make our circle of thread from fabric, left hand, circles around to right hand, wrap 1 time, put it in the fabric, pull the knot down, slide our thread through, and we have French knot, and we have finished our fishbone flower and our orange puff flower, and you are ready for the next day of stitching.